let's keep it this way. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, the issue is, since I mean, you've known me since for a long time, since I was a very
I've known you for over 20 years.
well,
You were
time
in
for
my class. You were in my class in 2007. No, 18 years, 2007.
I was a very ignorant and annoying student. I remember. I still am.
No, you were a very refreshing presence.
You are very kind.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I mean, you've known me since then, so you know this idea in my head, what I'm referring to, architecture and the soul. I want you to talk about, your memories, your experiences, and in the end, what really matters in architecture, both as a built a space, the person of the architect, and the society, sort of how Plato compares, in his Republic, the soul of a person and the soul of a society, with an eye to a perhaps largely forgotten meaning of architecture in the ancient sense, both
Yeah.
the way the priests and kings built from Gudea, the architect. I remember you mentioning how you studied
Yeah,
his.
I just visited him the day before yesterday. I took my students and I took them through the Louvre and I said, you can go after this, you can do whatever you want, but you need to come and come and it's a pilgrimage. You need to come and pay your respects to the first one.
So tell us why. It was Gudea. We have him from late third millennium BC, if I'm not mistaken. Then people like, they would depict themselves with a basket of earth on their heads to build. And then we have all these later great architects, architects of Hagia Sophia, and even the unknown, the peasant, uneducated sort of peasant, but with
Yeah.
such a loving observation and understanding of the environment, the way he would build. So please.
I would just tell you a story, which is a story because I'm a fourth generation architect. So I grew up with architects all around me, and also at the same time there were artists, there were musicians, dancers, and painters and sculptors, and so I grew up in this kind of place. People that wrote, and these were the things of value. We talked about these things at the dinner table. We didn't talk about money. We talked about taste. We talked about all these things, and about history, of course. But this is the story. I was a little kid. My father would occasionally take me with him to see things that he was building. So we went to this beautiful house that he had designed, was being built, and it was a house that was around a courtyard with plants and everything else, and it all, I mean, it was very much like an Eastern kind of house, but also very Greek in many ways. So we went to the main sort of living room, if you want, the winter living room. And there was this big wall, beautiful stone wall that included the fireplace that was inside that wall. And there was this old man who was the master mason. And my father looked at the wall and he called the master mason master something or other. The masons called him master also, the same way that you call, a colleague, not Mr. and all that. It was master, they were in the same business. So he said, Master so-and-so, I don't think that you didn't put your soul into this, did you? And the old man just, he nodded and he said, you're right, Master Panos, I didn't. There was nothing else said. A couple of weeks later, we went back and there was a different wall. And my father asked me, you see the difference? And I could see, I tried very hard, but I could see a difference. And I didn't quite know. I mean, I was a kid. I was a little boy. And ever since then, I have tried in small ways, mostly, and in the present conditions, to not only put my soul into things that I do, but also to see other people's souls in it. So I think these are important things that when you just work for money, and when the people that are working with you are also working for money, it's just a return on investment, that kind of thing, very narrow-minded sort of. You lose those things, and if you lose those things, you lose your soul. And architecture is a place where you should find your soul, even in small ways. I'm in this little apartment in an older building in Paris. And it has these magnificent windows bringing in. I mean, this is early in the afternoon here. Then you can see the light coming in this way. And then there is a view of, right across the street. No, it's not a huge street. It's not an avenue. You have a building that is very similar to the building where I'm in. And it's, it's simple, nothing fancy. And yet, it's there. There is a presence. And I look at this every day. It's the second year that I'm staying here. And I say, really, this is where it's at, and you open it up. And every day you find something new that you hadn't seen before. And it's the same thing, but it catches the light, it catches the sky, essentially. It catches what is the sky doing? and it brings it down to earth. And that's, for me, that's that's something that you have to, architects, and that's what I ask my students always, what is it that why are you in this thing? Why are you doing all this? And I tell them what I'm using, what I'm telling you, what I'm teaching you is useless. But it's the things that are the useless things that are of the greatest utility in your life, especially today, because today you're very all these useful things that you're learning, like computer programs and this and that and the other. These are things that very soon will be taken over. They're already taken over by machines, right? So what are you doing this for? Are you a machine and competing with machines, or are you something else? So yeah, I mean, my daughter is studying architecture. She's beginning to work now in offices. And these are the things in her mind also. And I really admire her because she suffers. It's not okay, all right, I solved this problem, I did it on time, I'm getting paid and all that, but it's why am I doing all this, So yeah.
So why the importance of Budia? You mentioned you took your student on a pilgrimage. What do you mean, and why a pilgrimage, and why him?
Why? Because you have to, if you think that things start with you, in many ways they do, because you're a new person, but you have a long, long, long history behind you, people like you, because this guy was not any different from you, you are the same machine, right? Then here's this guy that's 4,000 years ago. The date on that statue was 2,120 years, as much as you got, before the Common Era, So it's 4,000 some years ago. And I said, he was doing the same thing. And it was important. It was so important that they put it on his tablet. And he was a king. He was not, he was an important person, He had all these people, And he was probably a holy person because in those days the kings were also the representatives of the forces from above. They were uh, you know, Rasulin, there were envoys of God. So yeah, I think it's important to understand where you're coming from. And we all come from there because this guy, was not, you couldn't say in today's terms, oh yeah, he was, Iranian or Greek or American or whatever. He's this guy that existed in a realm that we don't have any kind of political or other interest, But he
They
was,
were city-states. There were still no empires. They were city-states, very organic
yes,
city-states.
they're organic. It was a very organic thing. Yeah, yeah. I'm just last year we went to visit a farm in the middle of Paris. That was it's a beautiful project. I'll send you a link to it. Um, really, very simple, beautiful project, and very complex at the same time. And it was built really as a beautiful building, but it was a way to pull the community together and to and the people, the architects and all the people that are working there now, they're all part of the neighborhood. So they did something for the neighborhood. And it was part of something that the mayor of Paris, wanted new ideas. And these guys were selected. And they selected the site, an abandoned site in their neighborhood. And they made this urban farm with a uh, a residential building for students and for homeless people that are not there because of charity. They're there because they're learning how to work. They're getting back into life, and they took part in now they're, the buildings are finished, but they're the ones that are managing the farm and all that. And there is a community restaurant, but it's a good restaurant, and they're using their own materials, for the restaurant. And they have a big greenhouse on top. And it's, all of a sudden you're in Paris and you think, where am I? And all these people are, you go in and you don't think of these guys as, okay, 6 months ago, this person was, living, in the, under a bridge, and had been doing that for I don't know how many years. But all of a sudden they had a dignity, they were the dignity that they always had, but it was protected, and they were treated like everybody else. It was not okay, Here are these poor people and we make them do this out of charity. And one of the things they do is they recycle and they compost all of the area restaurants' leftovers. So all this used to be part of this railroad line that is abandoned now. And it was sort of a garage, so it's a brownfield. The earth is contaminated. And what they have done is they have made the earth healthy again by bringing back the compost, the things that come out of the earth. And you go in there and it's just, it's unbelievably beautiful. And people from the neighborhood stop by and have a cup of coffee or something. And everybody eats the same food. They, if you're visiting, it's, you pay for your food, like you do in a restaurant. But the people that live there, they have the same food. It's not like, oh, they have, a piece of bread and a vegetable. So and it's very humble, but at the same time, it's incredibly beautiful. And it is surrounded by social housing. So it's like multi-story housing that is it's not bad, but it's just, regular, it's just, and yet all this housing now has this little place in the middle of it that belongs to everybody. It's like everybody's restaurant, everybody's yard, everybody's, and they all work for it. So these are humble things that, and the interesting thing is that the architects are an architecture office that is composed of women, all women, the friends, they all live in the neighborhood. And then the main sort of theoretical consultant, if you want, is the husband of one of these women, who is a professor of philosophy. And he is the philosopher that brings other philosophers. So the place becomes a place where philosophers come and congregate, and they talk about the future and how are we going to make sure that this becomes something that repeats itself around the city, and so on and so forth, that it isn't just something that we managed to do that. How can we resolve all that? And it's very it's not just a project. Okay, I build this project and I sell it. Then they found money for it. They found all this stuff. They convinced people. So there's good things happening. And I see that as the future. It's like, it's not anymore, okay, you got a good commission, you're a good architect, you make something beautiful and it's there forever and everything else. That happens too. But architecture becomes a place like it was, back in the times of Gudea, where everybody got together and they built their own nest, their own place on the earth. And it all had to do with survival, it had to do with agriculture, it had to do with water, it had to do with all of the things that we are now in the process of losing. So, yeah, that's why I go to Gudea. It brings me all these things, you know. And I've loved Gudea for a long time. And, I discovered him way back when I was a student in the States, and I was the age you were when I met you. And then I found him. They had him in the basement in the Louvre. That's what they had. I mean, the Louvre was not like it is now for big tourists and all that. 10.5 million people a year. It was an old palace with beautiful things in it that were just at the disposal of a few people that took interest in them. You would go in there, and I would go to places where now there's like people are pushing one another, to take selfies, and I was by myself on a Saturday. On a Saturday, yeah. So, and I would go. I found him down there in the basement, and I would go and visit him regularly. So every time I come to Paris, this one of my visits is Gudea. Gudea of Lagash.
I want to ask you something particular about this statue, but before that, what you said synced so well with what has been on my mind, because what you described, the good things that are going on and their similarity to the ancient pattern of Polymnia Athanasiadis, the greatest scholar of late antiquity, she
Told me,
talked
yeah,
about in Hellenic times, Greco-Roman times, how cities were anthropocentric,
yeah,
to designed to sort of bring out the best in human beings, this sense of community. While cities now, I think, are rarely designed like this. I think they are money centered. They're only largely everything is transactional and measured, most things in terms of quantity and monetary value. But
yeah,
as you mentioned, well, people like Gudea, I mean, this is a time before empires. Of course, a bit later we have the Ur third period, which empires are beginning to form. But these were city-states. They work together. But what's interesting is that the importance of architecture why this mattered so much for them, that it should be the, I mean, their idea of a king, as you rightly said, was very different from what people understand. The king was sort of like a servant and a shepherd. Shepherd was actually one of their titles.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the myth of Inanna and Dumuzi, you know, when she, the goddess, the mother goddess, chooses the shepherd. And that's why ancient Mesopotamian kings depicted themselves receiving the circle and the line, the rod and ring of kingship from her. And they saw it as their duty to sort of cultivate the land, to cultivate life. Rebirth was important. I mean, they could have all the money in the world, but you see, I think in our times, money is the end. You know, even when people become artists and architects, they're looking for fame and money. I mean, people like the pharaohs of Old Kingdom, they had all the money in the world, but they were looking at another realm, and this was different. This wasn't suffocating life for the sake of death, as is happening now in some, you know, traditions which are honestly, in my opinion, dead. But it was constant rebirth. I mean, they understood the cycle of, and they would build in a way to emphasize this, you know, the spaces that they would build and the festivals that they had that continued in some ways, you know. And
but you know, there is hope. And yesterday I had a glimpse of hope. I'll tell you, and this was not because you can tell people, you know, you tell students this and that and the other. And sometimes, you know, it's you know, you think they understand it, or you give them a test or some sort of thing, and so yesterday we took those 20 students to Versailles. You know, I mean, the great, you know, palace, you know, the greatest palace with the wonderful gardens and all that. And of course, right now, everything is for tourists. You know, I mean, you've got long lines of people from all over the world. You have to make reservations. You have to have papers, and you know, all of that. You know, that they are, you know, making money, and they're able through that to conserve this monument and so on and so forth. But there is a monument. You know, I mean, people that go there, including my students, they have no great sort of deep understanding of, you know, the historical circumstances and who was Louis the 14th and all that. The first thing I noticed was that these kids were well dressed. They had put on the good clothes to go. Then they knew that this was going to be a whole day. We spent about 9-10 hours walking around, making drawings and all that. So it was a work day. All of them, they were wearing the best clothes. Yes, they had the backpacks and all that. They were clean. The girls had the makeup on. It was, you know, like they were going to visit the king. It was not, and then we went there, and there's all kinds of ugliness, you know. I mean, people in shorts and, you know, just ill-kept and all that. And so I called them. I said, come here. You know, we were one of the chapel, actually, that was open, and a beautiful space. And I told them that. I said, you know, I commend you. It means something. It means that you've learned something at home. Not, it's a useless thing, right? I mean, you could have worn your underwear, you know, whatever. Nobody would tell you anything. And yet, you thought this is important, and I'm going to go to this beautiful, great palace and all that, and I put on my best clothes, just like I do when I go to church, for instance. So, and you give honor to architecture and to everything that it has been, and it has stood for, you know, 400 years now. So I'm constantly, uh, I'm constantly encouraged by things like this. And so I think we're not doomed because there are so many good people around. And we tend to, you know, look at the nastiness. Wherever we go, there's a lot of nastiness. I mean, it's like, I mean,
Of
sometimes,
course.
I try to not read more than the headlines of things in the news, unless it's something that I feel is, I mean, it will impact things immediately. But, I know what is happening, it's horrendous. Whether it's Iran, in the United States, it's wherever you go, and a whole bunch of people that are lying, and it's ugly. It's ugly and it's really useless. That's the useless stuff. Yeah.
But life and rebirth always wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We shouldn't focus too much. I mean, the only useful thing about focusing on ugliness is that we understand, so we can understand beauty. Because the worst kind of ugliness is the one that sort of tries to imitate truth. This sort
Yeah.
of perfect inversion, which is very difficult to recognize because it's the same, only inverted. But to go back to this statue, yes, please go on.
You like Gudea,
Yeah, yeah, to go back to it, and the idea of beauty that you mentioned, the way, I mean, we have this in the Platonic tradition. I mean, the beautiful, kalone, if I'm not mistaken, and the good and the one, they're the same. They're the name of the same thing. And you know, ugliness, I think, it speaks louder than anything else to sort of give a warning that there's something not right here. But the statue of Gaudiya in particular, what I mean, the plan is, if I'm not mistaken, is just a wall. I mean, it's a temple, but we see the wall of a temple.
Yeah.
Am I correct? And
Yeah.
so, the importance of a wall of enclosure. I mean, we have this even later when I think Prokopios is referring to Hagia Sophia. He calls it Temenos of the great God. This idea of a
Yeah.
Temenos, and this
Temenos
idea,
is the piece that is set apart. And
yes,
it
the
comes from the
sacred
word temnon, which means to cut.
to cut. And also we have this in the oldest epic Gilgamesh, both in its first tablet and the last 11th tablet. It emphasizes that inspect the walls of Uruk,
Yeah.
inspect the walls and find the secret gate and find the lapis lazuli tablet hidden in a box. So it's referring to a sort of a secret, a celestial secret hidden in a secret gate, which is almost, it reminds me of the celestial Jerusalem with its gates, and the
Of
gate that's
course.
closed.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
so what do you make of this whole thing and the statue of Gaudiya and the plan that's depicted so carefully on that statue? What's that about?
Well, it's what you just said. It is, the in those days, I mean, just the fact that, you made these big walls, and, these are the way that these walls are depicted there, because obviously these people did not build these paper thin walls, they built them out of mud, out of mud bricks, and so these walls were heavy, they were enormous, they were like the parts of ziggurats, and they came out of the mud of the great rivers, that would flood all the time, and so on and so forth. So he's got these very thick walls, and then in these thick walls, there are also like, the reinforcements that go in like this, like that, like that. And then you have these little entrances, that start on the outside bigger and then they become smaller. And so they obviously, here is a person that is uh, singing about inside and outside, esoteric and exoteric. It's all the stuff that we talk about. We've talked about it all the time. It's the business of in and out that we all have. And now a lot of what we do is out. We're not taking care of the in. And that's where the box with the lapis lazuli is found. So we're not turning inside. We're not taking those gates and coming inside, but constantly on the outside of this wall, right? And thinking that we're doing well, but we're not taking care of what is inside the wall. And that's how I take it. I mean, because there is, even in a simple place like this, just being surrounded by something that protects you, and that was what's inside of you. Something that does that. Even in the humblest and the most sort of utilitarian little places that you can live, And perhaps, we lose that because we don't, we live in in places that are dispersed. You go to these places that are too big. I mean, people live in, especially in these Western sort of consumer societies and all that. They want to live in these, I don't know, humongous houses and things that are, they destroy the idea of inside and outside. I would go, a while ago, I did this house and we had to select a contractor. So my clients found a contractor. Turned out to be very good. And I said, look, I want you to take me because these were wealthy people that were going to build a beautiful house and all that. But there were people that were very conscious of good things, they were not superficial. So I said, I want you to take me to all the houses that you've done that are big and fancy and whatever. And we'd go one after another. We'd go to these houses around golf courses and clubhouses and that. And they had 4 stories or 3 stories, and they had a gym and this and that, and these humongous, And I said, these salons and things like that. And I said, how many people live here? I said, oh, 2, 2 people. Well, 2. Why do they need, 8 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms and so you look around for signs of life and there was nothing. It was all like a decoration, there was nothing happening. And next to the kitchen, always, I mean, there were 4 or 5 houses like that. It was the same pattern. There was a little place, a small room, and in this small room they had the television and 2 big chairs, very, armchairs, very comfortable. And then there was a little table, and you could see the leftovers of their life, I mean, so this is where they hung out, this is out of this enormous place. This was the place where it was home. The rest was nothing. So this was the only inside that they were experiencing, in their lives. And we do a lot of this, and of course, people that don't have the possibility of having these enormous places and all that would like, because they're conditioned to think, oh, I'm so unfortunate not to have this enormous place. And they think, oh, well, I mean, I need to get something bigger than something outsized. So their attention is diverted. And by doing this, they serve they begin to worship, essentially, without understanding that they're doing so. They're beginning to worship the people that have these houses, that embody these, rotten values. Why this? And they're ugly. I mean, all these places are ugly. They're badly made and all that. Yesterday in Versailles, there is this little bosquet, this little you have right outside the gardens with the parterre, they're all very, very geometric and very flat. And then you go down one level and you have a huge area that has symmetrically placed essentially forests. And in these forests, you have these interior, again, geometrically carved out areas. And each one has a pool of some kind and a statue or a set of columns, something that is like a building without a roof. And so in this enormous place, these are just beautiful interior spaces, but they're open to the sky. There is no ceiling. The ceilings, ceiling is a word for sky, right? It comes from the word for sky, cielo. So over there, the sky is the sky, It's not like inside Versailles, where all the ceilings are decorated with amazing paintings of clouds and angels going up and mythological scenes and all that. So you go in there, and one of these places is a colonnaded room, and there's a statue in the middle, very classical. It's a circle, and it's a colonnade. And this is a place that has existed since the 1600s. It is absolutely perfectly preserved. I mean, the materials are beautiful. The craftsmanship, nothing has moved. Everything, it has gotten old. Yes, there is, there's things that are obviously that were not shiny the same way that they were shiny 400 years ago. But it's just, and I asked the students, I said, look, this has been around for 400 years. What makes it be this beautiful? It isn't just proportions and all that. It is just the love with which it was made and the skills, the material, that these people that were making it were not just, okay, quick, let's get the plan and do it. No, for them, they put their soul into it. And you tell them these things and they will sink in. Someday they will sink in. Who knows what they will do in their lives? Who knows? Doesn't matter. It's these things that will sink in, these useless things that it has nothing to do with Revit or whatever other. I remember this because it bothered me so badly. And there was nothing I could do about it because that's where we live. When you presented in second year these beautiful drawings inspired by the monastery with the water and the people and all that, and none of my colleagues saw anything in it except that it wasn't what is being done today. They did not go beyond, the architectural magazines, and all the sort of half-boiled theories that they're studying and everything else. Perhaps not half-boiled, but, things that are in fashion, And I was just, and it freaked me out. I mean, it's just, is this where we live? I mean, this is the place. Yeah, I understand if there's a whole bunch of narrow-minded business people that are giving this critique. Yeah, I mean, I understand that because this is not something that has anything to do with money. It has nothing to do with all of the things you stand for. But here's a bunch of colleagues. These are bloody architects. These are people that are supposed to, acknowledge and worship beauty and truth, because there's a lot of truth in there, and there were many things that you could get out of it, because it's about a lifestyle, a kind of life that was in harmony with the world, not just with nature, not just with the world. it was part of the world, and they had no idea. And it was a very, very, very big disappointment, because I was expecting, okay, here we are, we're not in the United States, we're not in the heart of, the West that has forgotten all these things. We are in the middle of the desert. We are next door to where Muhammad was. We are next door to where Christ was. We are next door to where the great civilizations of the Fertile Crescent were, the great civilizations of Egypt. And these guys have absolutely no clue. So I don't know.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that's the sad thing. Actually, I have a feeling that there's more rebirth. I mean, things have changed now. I mean, some interesting and beautiful things I think are being done in the region, but the sad thing is that actually in the home of these traditions, one finds more misery, than because civilization moved for various
Yeah,
reasons, and people
yeah.
moved with it, where there was freedom to express themselves. And I don't know, but it means a lot. What you said, but the dilemma is, I mean, I was meant to ask you as a last question, but you sort of answered it without me asking. So what's your advice for an architect, for an artist, to sort of not lose that beauty, that love, that soul? And it sometimes gets very difficult in this world, because I mean, as you know, for various reasons, I left and I continued studying on my own. And if it wasn't for my particular circumstances, and most people cannot do that, because to survive in this world, and I understand the mindset of the teachers, because to be a successful architect, you shouldn't build like this. So it's a sort of what used to be common and ordinary and acceptable in the ancient world. Now it's a luxury if one wants to build like that. And
Yeah,
there are very
yeah.
few clients who understand. I mean, I'll be lucky. I mean, this is my dream. If I still haven't built anything, but to build a simple, we say chahar tal, 4 arches and a dome, the proper proportion, as a sort of a temple
Exactly.
by ancestors. And that's the dream, but until I get to that, I've been sort of studying this philosophy. So you mentioned the philosopher guy, and this idea of philosophy in the ancient sense, preparation for death, not for the
Yeah,
sake of it, but for rebirth, to create life, to understand these
yeah,
patterns.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's difficult and it's sweet at the same time. So I remember one of your phrases you once told me, beauty always. Beauty always. So it was a comment you posted on one of the photos I posted. So I'll ask again. So in summary, what's your advice for an artist, for an architect, to manage to survive in this world, but at the same time not lose what matters most in their soul?
Yeah, I mean, it depends uh, on the time when you discuss these things. First of all, it's very, very easy to give advice uh, as a sort of a general thing. Okay, this is the advice, and you end up with very good aphorisms and all that. But I think advice should be something that every person can interpret their own way and take their own. Uh, I think that um, an important thing is to set up some aims, and these aims are not just to go forward, but it's also to go upward, to go up. That whatever you do should enhance your sort of spiritual life. And it depends. I mean, people will interpret that in a different way because they come from different traditions, they come from different, but something that is essentially useless, right? That it is not going forward, say, oh, today I have 5, tomorrow I will have 10, and in 15 years I'm going to have 150, It's not has to do with quantity. It doesn't have to do with any of the other things that we value and the measures of so-called success, the measures of achievement, if not success. So, and that's a tough thing to do because it requires another kind of a focus that is not just everybody else's focus. But you find, and I have found throughout my life, always people of different sorts. They're not university people or students or architects or whatever. It could be the cleaning lady, outside here. That because she has had, probably being an immigrant, being a poor person, she has had to look at life from a different point, and she has always had to look up, not just forward, because the forward is not something that she's going to go, that she's going to achieve, she's going to look up. That's what the older generations that were whose material futures were very, very limited, they always looked up. And so my advice would be to anyone, and that's the advice that I give to my students also, and my kids, my children, is that life is um, something that is complex and everything else, but it is something that allows you to go up and to view things in a different way and to achieve things in a way that is not, you don't get any prizes for it, You know what your prizes are. And so sometimes I tell these kids, that I'm very worried about this and that, and, I'm getting a job and, getting a car and getting all this. And sometimes they come and they ask me next year I finish up, what should I do? And I said, well, I said, are you married? No. You have children? No. Do you have a mortgage? No. Do you have a car? Yeah. I mean, I said, well, sell your car, put your belongings and sell whatever you don't really need, put your belongings in a bag and travel and go and find ways. I mean, you can, you're young and you'll find, just look at the world around you and look up. And at some point you'll come back. And if you want to be doing what you studied and all that, you'll do it. And if not, you will be doing something else. You'll be living somehow differently. Find yourself. And so they look at me like I'm crazy. But I said, I asked them, I said, how old are you? Usually, it's like, I'm 22, I'm 23. I say, are you ever going to be 22 or 23 again? No. So this is a moment to do it. And if you do it through life this way, and I'm telling you something, I mean, I am almost 80 years old and I have 8 children. I mean, like the whole catastrophe, as Zorba the Greek said. And I find myself doing stuff like that. And people, why are you doing this? Why are you? I mean, you're essentially like, you're gonna die, right? I mean, okay, you're 80 years old, so how many more years? I said, yeah, okay, so I will die anyway at some point, but I want to, I want to reach somewhere else before I do. I want to understand more things. I want to learn more things. I'll keep on doing all of this. It's and then you teach by example. This is my, yeah, you can say things and people will understand them one way or misunderstand them a different way. But if you do or you try to do the things that you tell them to do, then it's more, they will think back and they'll say, wow, this guy was, not just telling us things out of a book, but he lives this way. Yesterday, I give you an example. I don't want to talk about, my achievements or whatever that is. We went to Versailles. These are all these kids. I had 22 years old, 23. I think the oldest one is like 24, 25. So we go to Versailles, and it's really, we are from 9 o'clock until, well, that doesn't include the travel because it's an hour travel, right? So you get up at 5:30, you take the metro at 6:30, and you're at Versailles at 8:15, and then you walk and you wait in line and you get all that. And we left at 5:30, and we didn't stop moving all day. So one of these kids said, how can you do this? I mean, we are ready to fall apart, and you're just walking. I said, well, I'm hurting just like you are. But I said, how can you do that? I said, first, it's because I have the gift, from above to have good health and all that. Then it's because somehow, at some point in life, not always, to take care of it, to respect it, to say, okay, thank you, I'll take care of my health. I'll take care of, and then because I'm interested in it, I'm learning something every day, I'm not dead yet. So I think that's important. So at some point they may think, oh, well, I'm getting so old. I'm 60 years old, or I'm 55, and I'm tired. I'm this and that. So, well, there was this crazy guy that was a lot older than me, and he was going around Versailles and telling us things and stopping and gesticulating and doing all these things. So, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. And that's another thing, that you have to tell them that there's something beyond. And it's difficult because, they're also enclosed in their own sort of churches and all sort of religious kind of things. It's difficult for them, for most of them, not for everyone. Depends on what kind of families they come from and what they're struggling to free themselves from. But you have to be very careful because they're very eager to see some sort of, I'm sort of a missionary, or you're trying to proselytize us or something like this, Yeah, it's true.
I know that's really gets on my nerves. This is something which sadly is happening a lot these days. This sort of.
Yeah. So I mean, I tell them the things that I learned, and you remember. I mean, I'm reading and I'm remembering Korban, all the things that you guys directed me to learn, and learning Arabic and trying to understand all these wonderful things that are happening there, and uh, so I tell them things about Islam, and they're looking at me like, "Are you Muslim with this kind of accent?" I see what's going on in their mind. They don't ask me, but there's all this thing. Oh, the Muslim bad,
I wouldn't, sort of. I mean, a younger me would have No, I understand it. It's understandable because, to be fair, Muslims have messed up monumentally, in my honest, my humble opinion.
That's true.
And organized religion as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, what you mentioned. I mean, I can say this about you. You're one of very few teachers and masters that I've seen that absolutely have no ego. You've never been pedantic. You've never, what I would call academics in a negative sense, which are basically secular mullahs. A mullah I define as someone who thinks his knowledge, his erudition, his understanding of terms, so perfectly sort of saves him and makes him better than everyone else. But you've always shown by example in your humility, even when we were arrogant as students, and also most important of all, even when we didn't ask how you are, you always sent an email, and inquired after our health and our well-being. And what you mentioned about going up, I mean, that's the only thing that even the situation which I mentioned, how Muslims have messed up.
Yeah.
All religions. I mean, when one goes up this idea of the cosmic mountain, this is something that mystics and Sufis and Kabbalists and Platonists understood, that the all these petty competitions is because people don't understand each other's language. But when you go up the mountain and view from that perspective, this idea of a ziggurat, step by step, which in ancient Mesopotamia, interestingly, was a sort of a vertical projection of because they had adjacent temples. So the ziggurat was a vertical projection of the plan of the temple as you went up.
Oh, absolutely.
The meaning of unity that in Persian poetry, which is a survival of this ancient wisdom in a coded, highly coded language of poetry, which I think few people really, I mean, I wish more people would understand that they define something, they a religion of love. They have this idea of a religion of love, which is beyond faith and unbelief. I mean, Rumi explicitly, he says, عاشق تو یقین دان که مسلمان نبود در مذهب عشق کفر و ایمان نبود. Know for certain that a person who follows Eros, the religion of love, is not a Muslim. And in the religion of love, there's neither kufr, disbelief, atheism, nor iman, belief. But then as soon as one mentions these things, there's all this discussion. Oh, so you're saying that, this the sort of goofy Sufis, and are you saying that Rumi was a hippie? And no, he was a Muslim and he prayed. I think if he was alive, he would sit with the hippies rather than with these people who are willing to destroy life, to destroy living, to destroy happiness of others for the sake of rigid forms, formality, exterior. And what can one say?
Yeah, I mean, but these are the good things because they make you think about, they make you think about Rumi.
And hope in the younger generation. I mean, you mentioned these young people. I see the same thing in Iraq. It's the younger generation, the generation younger than me. That's been saving us. The sort of the bravery that they have, even though they've lived in situations far worse than we grew up.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Now I lost you. I lost you.
Of the region. That's the way I see it.
Yes, the outcome is that and of course there are many reasons for people to tell you, you must be a sort of unreasonably optimistic and all that. Optimism may be a result of idiocy, but hope is not, because hope is something that is not explained by logic. Optimism, you say, yes, I see this and I see that, and because of this and because of that, I make the conclusion that we can, go ahead and not, and have a better life or whatever it is you're talking about. There's not going to be a war, or there's, all these things will balance out and everything else. Yeah, that's fine. But hope comes from above. Hope is a miracle. It is not logical. It is not logical. So people that will ask you, uh, why? Because I said, yeah, I understand. I've always believed in God. I believed in this so great and um, uh, magnanimous power that exists. So why? I said, because every day I see miracles. So I believe in miracles. Yeah, and I see also things that are achieved by logic and by the scientific method and all that. But you know, and this is what we bring. We being people who are artists, who are architects, people who study in books, people who are doing a lot of these useless things. you know, and uh, this is what we bring. We bring hope. We bring an understanding of things that you cannot understand by logic. You know, and therefore these are many times the things that organized religion has done away with. Yeah, they put, they say things about it and all that because they have to. But very often, and that is not, I mean, it's not, it's interdenominational. It's not, it doesn't happen, oh yeah, you people are like this and we people are like this and we're better than you and all that. That's everybody. It happens everywhere. And so I don't know, it's uh, something that I think you have to, when you talk to, at least when I talk to other people, even when they think I'm a complete idiot, doesn't really matter. I say, well, this is where things are at. Yes, I understand, the political forces and, all of this stuff. Yeah, that's part of the world also. But on the other hand, there is another side, and that's what we bring to that side. That's the difference between an engineer, if you want, and an architect in the conventional senses. On the other hand, the great engineers worked like we did. Yes, there's two stories about Freycinet, was the great French engineer that did all the very big, first great concrete bridges and things like that. And he went to the School of Fine Arts, called the Beaux-Arts, to give a lecture to the students. And they asked him, the students, he told about, they said, oh, so how do you figure out, how to make this bridge? And my father said, how? And of course, in those days, these people were always dressed very well and, very elegant. And he went on one side of the board and he put a point, and then he went to the other side of the board and he put a point there. And then he said, well, we do things the same way you do. And so he went from one side of the board to the other, and he made this beautiful curve. And he said, we make a beautiful curve. And that's how we calculate it. Nervi did the same thing. Nervi was talking about one of his uh, palazzos, those little thin shell structures and all that. And this young engineering student stood up And he said, oh, so you calculated that with this and this and that formula, all that stuff. And Nedvi said, not really, I did that by intuition. Because I have, and the intuition is not, it's informed intuition because you have practiced it, you have learned how to do that. And that's very hard to teach these guys because they think of the outcome. It's okay, I'll put this and in half an hour I'll get that. And then you say, no, this is not, this has freed you because you can do all the stuff that will make you survive and you can sell your design and all that because the computer can do that. And tomorrow you're going to tell AI, do me this and they will do it, in 5 minutes. But, what's this to you? How do you go down the street and judge things and be inspired by things? And, what are the things you can do? And so they say, oh, how can you do this in 2 minutes? You can make this drawing so quickly and so accurately and all that. And you do it in no time at all. I said, no. I said, what do you mean in no time at all? I said, well, I timed you, you spent 2 minutes. And I said, no, you didn't time me correctly. It's taken me 65 years. 65 years of constant practice. And when I don't practice, I feel that I have sinned. That's the good thing being a teacher, that you have to practice because you draw on your students' drawings, you look at the stuff, you discuss them, and so on and so forth. And it's lovely. Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow.
So you're going to be a teacher at some point.
You think I have the potential for it? I hope so.
Yeah, you're going to be a teacher. So we have to get you out of there, or just things have to to change over there. God,
Oh,
man,
thank you so much for this, Stephen. So, with your
Habib,
permission,
it's always a great pleasure to see you and to speak to you.
you're very generous as always with your time. Thank you, Alkis. So, with your
There is
permission, I will.
at the entrance of this, the rooms in the Louvre, they're enfilade. You go from one to the other to the other to the other. There's not like a corridor. They have made some corridors now, but normally it's enfilade. So you go from one room to the other. So in front of the room, and that's why I took a couple of pictures of you. In front of the room where Gudea is, there is a case, with smaller things that behind glass, so that people cannot steal them and abuse them in any way. And there is a small statue with a head that is exactly you. It is from, I don't know, Ur or Babylon or some, place from your part of the world. And I was looking at you and I said, this is the head of this. I don't remember who it was, probably a priest or a king or something important. And I thought, this is now the head in that case that is speaking to me. Alhamdulillah.
It means a lot. Thank you. That's well, ancient Pythagoreans, they believed in reincarnation, so who knows?
Yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I believe it too. Yeah.
So, with your permission, I will try to download and then upload this video for your students on YouTube if it's okay.
Whatever you want to do. Yeah, just say that I apologize for everything that I've said that makes no sense. if nothing of it makes any sense. So I apologize for the whole thing.
No, I have to apologize. I wish I could speak less and let you talk more.
Or anything that sounds self-aggrandizing and all that. I didn't mean it that way.
That's one of the difficult things to, I think, for a lot of people and for us to distinguish this idea. I mean, that can be another discussion. In this idea of a self, when is it a lower ego and when is the ego truly effaced and the person, sort of like these ancient architects, is just a vessel that transmits something. That's difficult to tell, especially when there's again a total inversion. This is the idea of the Antichrist, the Satan as the ape of God. He's trying to imitate the good, and a lot of people are fooled because he's doing it. But there's always something grotesque and ugly, and I think that's ugliness is a
ugly.
Yeah, there's something grotesque, ugly, and funny. But no, in you there's none of that. It's just when you speak, it's like Socrates speaks. If I may say so.
I asked my class, and this is the other side of things. These are the 20 wonderful young people, men and women. And so I asked them, because I was talking about philosophy and things like this, in the context of drawing and architecture and design and all that. And I said, and learning. And I said, now, who was Socrates? Habib. One person out of 20. And these are 4th and 5th year students. One person out of 20 knew that Socrates was a philosopher. And when I asked further, I said, what else do you know about Socrates? Who were Socrates' friends? When did he
Maybe that's unbelievable, maybe.
1 out of 20. And then later I thought, okay, try my chance again. So I don't know why I was, oh yes, because I was talking about, how, about memory and how you remember things because the things that you remember, then they're not, you can't just put them in the memory here, this part of you, they become part of you. These are the things that you can reinterpret and reconstruct and so on. And in very real terms, I said, out of, I gave them an exercise where they had to assume that something that they had visited and taken notes of was bombed, and they had to reconstruct it. And I said, well, you have to remember what it is. And I said, well, during the war, Warsaw was destroyed. But before the war, these guys were smart, and they knew something was going to happen. So they had documented all the buildings. So after the war, they were able to rebuild the whole thing, the way it was. And then it occurred to me, and I asked the question, where is Warsaw? No one knew, Habib. 20 out of 20 did not know where Warsaw is. Oh my Lord.
That's sad, but to be an apologist for them, I mean, a younger me, I mean, I remember when at the end of second year, I was also upset. I mentioned this in my presentation that, none of my classmates know about the Buddhas of Bamyan, how dare you? So, but I think it's more, I mean, ideally it's perfect to know Socrates and know these things. But what happens is that a lot of people, again, think that the knowledge of these things matter, but to embody Socrates, I mean, I think it's more important to to be like, because I know a lot of people who can talk for hours and in a very erudite manner about Socrates and Aristotle, but in their behavior and mien, they are more like
That's
a
true.
tyrant of Syracuse, you know, Diogenes who almost killed Plato. So they become tyrants with their knowledge. So, you know, yeah, that's sad. I mean, I wish more people knew about them, but then, I mean, what can one say? I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Anyway,
It's a fine line, you know, because knowledge can easily make one tyrannical.
but on the other hand, I mean, when I visited Iran, and I hope that I can, before I close my eyes, as I say, I can come back, you know, and I visited, you know, Hafez, I visited Hafez tomb in Shiraz, and we didn't make it to Saadi, but you know, I'd read, you know, Rumi, and I visited Rumi's place in Konya, you know. I did the pilgrimage in Konya, and I thought, well, you know, I would not have had the kind of inspiration, the kind of effect on me as a person if I hadn't read any of these things, if I hadn't read these poems, if I had, and it's not about encyclopedic knowledge. I mean, I could not repeat them, but it's just the stuff that is, it makes you be uh, a different kind of human, I think. Not that, you know, there's people that haven't done any of that and who are superior, you know. There's a different thing. But once you take, you know, I had this teacher, um, who was a little older than us. I was in first year in college, and then he was my teacher for a few more years, a sculpture teacher, and uh, he said to us, how many of you have taken sculpture before? And I mean, some of us had, or they had seen sculpture and all that, others hadn't. And he said, I just want you to understand that you all have a natural talent, that you can all make things. And you have done that ever since you were little kids. And it is a gift, that is a human gift. Everybody has it. And you have two ways to do it. One is to continue to be innocent and to act like you've done so far, you know? And that's fine. But in this case, get out of this class. Because in this class, you're going to follow the other side. You're going to be you're going to be corrupted by knowledge. You're going to be corrupted by the experience of other people. You're going to learn this, and that. And these things will take you further, but also they will become great obstacles because they will hide from you what you already have. And you'll have to find it again through all these obstacles. And when you find it, it's not going to be the way that it is now. It's going to be a different way. And in so many ways, it's so true. You know, Picasso said something similar. He said, you know, because Picasso grew up, his father was an academic painter and all that, and talented kid. So he said, you know, when I was 14, I could paint like Raphael, and the rest of my life, I tried to uh, paint like and draw like a kid of 5 years old. So,
Beautiful. Thank you.
uh, so yeah. So Habib, you take care. We'll talk again in about a month or so. We'll do that regularly. Yeah.
I would love to, yeah. choose a topic for next time, and I can pick your brains.
Okay. I'll choose any topic.
Give me some homework.
I will pick your brain in the next one. All
Set
right.
some reading and homework for me, and
I know exactly how I'm going to do it.
very kind. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. Thank you.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Okay.
Okay. Bye bye. Salam.
All right.